It is such a joy to be able to be back here and visit some. I know some of you here may not even know who I am, and that's a testament to the work of this congregation. I know I've heard of many people who have started to come here, many people who have become Christians since I've been gone, and that is a testament to what I talked about earlier, about how this congregation has a reputation for love of truth, love of people, and of wanting people to know the gospel. And so, for those of you who don't know who I am, I lived here a long time and was given a lot of love and grace and mercy from this group of people. And they're my family, and it's great to be back for today. I'm thankful I was able to fit it into my schedule. And so I was conflicted about what I wanted to share with you this morning, but I decided that I would share a lot of what I share at a lot of congregations I go to. Some of you may be interested in what I've been up to, but I also just want to share with you something that I think will be beneficial to you. Perhaps something that some of these principles that I'm going to talk about, I've talked about here before, but they're worth repeating. Something I mentioned in the class earlier is the idea that we're trying to make the work with Latin American missions more effective, that we're taking training and education seriously with those who partner with us, especially in campaigns. For those of you who don't know really what Latin American missions is, I've stepped in as the director of this. All it is a ministry of the Forest Park Church in Valdosta, Georgia. I work under some very good elders, very humble men who love the Lord and they love the church. And I ask your prayers for them. I ask your prayers for me as we endeavor to do justice to so much of the work that's already been done before us. That we are essentially just taking the torch of what they have done in decades past. The purpose of Latin American missions is simply to take the gospel to the Spanish-speaking world south of here. And so I want to just do a quick recap of what I talked about in class, just to give you an idea of the breadth of the work, because one of the things that is important for me to communicate to you is something that I didn't even realize when I was here, that we would go and partner with Latin American missions and do campaigns with them. I didn't know how big the work was. I didn't know how vast and how storied or historic the work had been. Let's see here. Let me know what I have on my notes. In 1965, really the work started in 1958 in Panama with those from South Georgia, from several churches there, who went down and they started preaching the gospel, and they found that it was very receptive around Panama City, around where the Panama Canal is. And there was a handful of congregations there, and they decided that they wanted to implement the pattern or the goal of training those who lived there to preach there, rather than sending those from those who didn't know the language and were a different type of culture to come in there and do that. And since then, they've gone from a handful of congregations to about 300 congregations just in Panama. And from the inception of the school, we've trained over 600 preachers there. Right now, we have 21 preachers in the school there in Panama City. And we train preachers from more than a dozen countries. And we even had one long-distance online student. They couldn't get there because of COVID from the Dominican Republic that just graduated. The school, Bible School of the Americas, BSA as we call it, is really the hub of the ministry that I'm involved in. And what branches off from that are really about three things. The first one is our alumni relations, where I will go to congregations and I will ask them to partner with me. I have a congregation in North Georgia right now who they're not doing anything with missions right now, but they want to. And so what I have done is I have worked with them in giving them a couple of really good candidates of guys that don't have any support, but have a ministry plan, like a 25-page typed up ministry plan of what they want to do where they are. They just need someone to partner with them to get their ministries off the ground. And so I'm working with them to be able to have their own guy, to have their own congregation where they go to this place and they take ownership of it. They support it. They send their own groups there. And so one of the things that I encourage congregations to do is to not think of ministries like Latin American missions as sort of the gatekeepers of missions or that kind of a thing, but to help congregations see their own work locally as a place that could be a hub for mission work. This place can be a hub for mission work itself. You know, when I was here preaching, that concept was kind of a foreign idea to me. I remember during COVID, somebody called me and said, since there weren't any planned mission trips, they called me and said, well, let's just do our own. And my response was sort of, are we allowed to do that? Do we have permission to do that? Right? It was kind of a weird thing that if you're partnering with someone that does mission work and they do the planning and things like that, that you kind of think, well, we need to depend on them. Well, one of the things I'm encouraging congregations to think about is the idea that they can do it on their own, that they can start from where they are. It may be that they can come and go on some campaigns with me, or they can partner with me and get connected with people that they don't know. I have elderships that talk to me and say, we really want to work with somebody, but we kind of don't know where to start. Can you point us in the right direction? And that's one of the things that I do is help facilitate making relationships like that. And so I want to tell you this morning that you have permission. Not that I'm giving permission, but I want you to know that you can do it. That you can initiate your own. That it isn't just a matter of going on a trip that I've planned, and I'm doing a couple of trips this summer. But it's a matter of understanding that you can take ownership of it yourself. You can cultivate relationships with someone. That's one of the great things about our school there is that we train guys, and we are confident in what they teach. We're confident in what they're taught. So those are our guys that we have confidence in, that we can connect with congregations. You can connect with one of our graduates, and you can invest in one place, and you can just do that on your own. And so what the ministry that I'm a part of is about facilitating those connections, showing people opportunities to be able to step into a place of taking ownership of missions on their own without really even having to do it with us. I will tell you this, though, if you would like to help us with financial support, the school that we run, of course, is like any preaching school. It's free to those who come. That's how preaching schools work for the most part. And so they exist off of those who give support. Right now, we have 21 students, and to give you an idea of how much it costs, it's about $1,500 a month per student just to run the place. And they go there, and about half of the students at our school, they live their own campus with their families. And we have some that are single that come, but they live their own campus, and it's a very rigorous 2-year work. Now, of course, we keep up with them. We make connections for them with supporting congregations, with those who can go and do evangelistic campaigns. We also do medical campaigns as well. We partner with doctors who go. I was on a medical campaign last year in Honduras where we had, I believe, 4 doctors from the United States, and we had a doctor from Honduras who was there, and she wasn't a Christian. And during that week, one of our men there studied with her, and she was baptized. By the end of the week, one of our doctors who wasn't a Christian became a Christian. And that's, to me, that was a really cool thing to witness. But our focus is evangelism, building up the church, showing the churches wherever we go that we love people, that we want to be servants to the community there. And so if you want to go on a campaign with me, I would love for you to go. And one of the things I talked about this morning is that on a campaign, what you realize is you have a lot more value to give to the kingdom than you perhaps think that you do. because when you're there, you will be given a job, and your job will be very important for the purpose of evangelism there. And so I don't want to get too deep into that, but one of the other things I mentioned was when you're working on a campaign like one of these, you realize that the church can function at 100%, that 100% of the members can have 100% participation because they see their value and they know their place. They know their place where they can contribute their value. And that can be a difficult thing for a congregation to work through and to discover over time, especially when you have people that are new Christians. It's a difficult thing to find them exactly what they bring to the table, and what they bring now may change in 5 years and may change in 10 years. But that is a worthy thing to try to do, is to find a place where they can plug in and take ownership of the work. On these campaigns, that's what we do. And so we do those campaigns with the graduates of our school for the most part. And so our campaigns that we do are a way that we help further the work that started at the school where we train preachers. And then, of course, we have future ministers training camps where we go to congregations and we train young people and try to cultivate candidates who can then go to the Bible School of the Americas. And we also have, of course, we have a woman's track at the school like most preaching schools do. We have women in all the preaching schools that I know of who sometimes they're with their husbands, but they go and they can take classes too, because a good elder is only as good as his wife, because the value that women bring to the church is the same as anyone else, and for them to be able to train is very important. And so that's a quick snapshot of this work that was started years ago that I'm just trying to do justice to. I appreciate your prayers about this. This is a worthy work and a daunting work, and I appreciate your encouragement as I've made this transition into this work. The Lord is glorified in the way that you have loved me and encouraged me in this way. And as I said before, the work that continues on in my absence is a testimony to your faithfulness. And the church at large sees what you are doing here, and you are an example to the kingdom. I want you to know that. I want you to know and not take lightly that you are an encouragement to many people that you may not even know exist. And so that's one thing I want to make clear to you this morning, that is true. Now, what I want to share with you as far as equipping you with something is I want to share with you the things that I'm going to teach during the campaigns. One of the things that's easy to do is to go on a trip like this, and you get real excited, and it can be for many people it is a life-changing experience. And they come home to their home congregation, and they're kind of looking around, and no one else really is on fire the way that they are at that exact moment. And that can be a little discouraging. And they don't exactly know where to start. Like, how can I start evangelism on my own? And so what I want to do on these campaigns is to give some basic equipping and let it be an educational experience while they're there. The Yes To campaigns that we do, they have that specific purpose for taking young people and pairing them with older people, and then they go out into the neighborhood, and the young people learn from the older people how to do it. And so these principles that I want to share with you are the principles that I went over with these congregations when I went to do the planning trips. Before these campaigns, I go to these places where we're going to take groups, and I do logistical work, but I also meet with the congregations, and I go through these principles with them. And it's amazing to me how when I would get done with going through these principles, they would say things like, "We didn't know you could have an organized evangelism. We didn't know that these types of principles existed." And of course, I didn't come up with these things. These are some things that I've shared here before. But it's very empowering to them that they said, oh, we actually think that this will work if we just implement these simple principles. And when I bring groups, that's what I'm going to do is to show them the game plan that we're going to be using for the week. Now, I sent out, and just so you know, I'm going to have a meeting with those who are going next week here if they want to pick my brain or have any questions about the campaign that we're going on next week. But if anyone else is interested, there's a campaign in July as well that is still open. I still need people for it. If you would like to go to Peru the third week of July, come talk to me about it. I may be able to still squeeze you in. One of the things that I have done that's one of the things that we do is we make a campaign guidebook that gives really all of the rules, the itinerary, and things that they can expect, what to bring, what not to bring, that kind of thing. And we send that out to everybody that's going to go on the campaign. And what I sent this year was also some bilingual contact cards that I came up with, and I'll talk about in a minute. But what I put on the back of the contact cards were the principles that I'm going to share with you this morning. They're basic evangelistic principles. Now, the first principle that's important to, you might say, to embrace. Now, this isn't 100% necessarily the time, but for the most part, the principle you have to embrace is that the way that people become Christians is by studying the Bible with someone. That it's a Bible study, that someone learns the truth. Every once in a while, they'll hear a preacher and they'll decide to obey the gospel, but that's becoming less and less and less of statistically the way people become Christians. It usually is because someone has just sat down with an open Bible and they've studied the Bible. And in particular, a structured study. And what I mean by that is a study that has a plan. I'm going to start at point A and it's going to go to point Z, whatever it is, and I know where I'm going. And trust me, as a preacher, there's a lot that can be said that when you have a structured study, it keeps you from saying. It kind of gets you and everything you know out of your own way, so that the study just guides you through it. And there's not one particular study that's better than any other studies. I know that we have Back to the Bible here. What I'm going to be using on the campaign is one that's sort of an abbreviated Back to the Bible that's called Does It Matter? And it's one that's just one study that you do with somebody. It takes an hour and a half. And it's just one tool that you can use. That's a study that's guided. I know I've had studies with people, and maybe you can relate to this, where it kind of wasn't necessarily structured, and what happened is that you ended up talking about all the religious stuff for several hours, and then you didn't really get anywhere by the end of it because it wasn't a planned Bible study about where I am and where I'm going. And another principle is this. And we got to be very careful about this. Another principle is, I'll get to this in a minute, but that whoever is asking the questions in a Bible study, that's the person who's in charge of the Bible study. They're guiding where you're going. And so if you may have somebody that likes to ask you Bible questions all the time, and if you're answering all those Bible questions all the time, then you're not getting to direct them to the things that they need to know. You're just going where they want to go, where their interests are, or their curiosities. And most of the time, for someone who's not familiar with the Bible or someone who is not a Christian, they are asking the wrong questions, and they're going a direction that they don't realize is not the direction they need to go. And so they need us to be able to ask the questions and to guide them. And so I want to go through just these really simple evangelism tips. You embrace these principles, and it will help to smooth out the pathway to bringing somebody to the gospel. The first one is, of course, Matthew 22:14 principle. Many are called, but few are chosen. The idea that it takes a broad net to find the few that will embrace the gospel. And so, right now, I can show you. In 1 minute, I can show you a way that you can have more contacts than you can follow up with. And we have a lot of contacts here to follow up with already. But if I were to get everyone in this room to write down a list of all the people you know who aren't Christians, how long would our list be? And then if I were to get to jog your brain a little bit by asking you to write down all the names of people that you know who have had a death in the family, or have had some sort of an illness, or who lost their job, or some sort of catastrophe like that, how long would the list be of everyone in here? And as one of the things that we've done here, and what if you sent cards to all of those people? What if you went and encouraged all those people? What if you made contact with all of those people? Then what's happened is you've cast a broad net to find the few that will be receptive. But that broad net is necessary, because if you talk to one person every day at work for 15 years, well, you've invested all of your evangelistic effort into one person, and they may or may not obey the gospel. And so cast that broad net. And, I'll get to that in a second. The second principle, I want to go through these quickly. The second principle is defer. Don't debate. Don't debate people on social media. Answer maybe some questions that people have. Don't debate people. That doesn't really get you anywhere. And sometimes it can cause antagonism. Instead, if someone has a question, say, especially at the beginning of a study, what I tell them is, we're going to write down all of your questions. At the end of the study, we'll go through these questions. But right now, let's just go through the study that I have. And what you might find out is as we go through this study, a lot of your questions will be answered that you're asking. And a lot of the questions that you didn't know to ask will be answered as well. And so defer those. And sometimes people are going to ask you loaded questions. They're going to ask you loaded questions because of their spiritual insecurity. They're going to ask you loaded questions to try to burn that bridge because they're kind of afraid to face their spiritual reality. And so they're going to say something like, I heard that you Church of Christ people think you're the only ones going to heaven. What are you going to do with that? Well, just say something like, do you believe that people that are faithful to Jesus are going to go to heaven? You think they're going to say yes or no? Well, they say yes. Then say, do you want to be faithful to Jesus? If they say, yeah. Well, then I want us to spend more time together then. You just diffuse that all together. You're trying to get them introduced to the gospel. That's what you're trying to do. Don't let them burn a bridge unnecessarily. Don't debate them. Defer so that you're not letting them get in the way of what they think is too scary for them to know, which is the truth. Another one is show them, don't tell them. You know, I can talk to somebody face to face, and it's easy for them to tell me no because I'm just a nobody. I'm just a person that has a mouth. But if I can get them to read it in the Bible, then they're going to have to tell God no. So if I can get them to sit down with a Bible in between us, and it's not me just rattling off passages that I've memorized. Instead, it's a matter of them reading it for themselves. And it's a lot more difficult to read a passage and to say, well, I know the Bible says it, but I don't care. It's really easy for them to hear you say something and say, well, I just don't care. That's a whole lot easier. So tell them, I'd rather show you than tell you. I'd rather show you in the Bible. I don't want it to be my word against yours. And that's an easy way to kind of remove yourself out of the equation. You know, the studies that we do, the Back to the Bible studies we have here, the Does It Matter studies that we're going to have in the campaigns, if you can read, then you can do those studies. If you can read, you can do those studies. And so it isn't a matter of your prior knowledge or anything like that. There may be some times where it can be a little bit difficult as you're studying through. I want to encourage you to come back this evening. I'm going to do a lesson this evening that will give you a couple of simple mental strategies when studying about something to help you grapple with some of the more difficult things that you'll have to discuss with someone when it comes to hashing out the particulars of doctrine in Scripture. These are principles that have helped me immensely be able to have clarity in my own mind about what is true and to help others have clarity about what is true in topics or areas or doctrines that we think have gray area or are fuzzy or just matters of we're going to agree to disagree when Scripture is actually very clear about it. And so I encourage you to come back this evening Because there are going to be some times where if you're really evangelizing with someone, you're going to have some clarity. You know, if you have not been evangelizing, then there's a pretty good chance that you may be a little fuzzy on what you think is right and wrong, or true or false, or the specifics of doctrine. When you actually sit down and study the Bible with somebody, it forces you to make a decision about what you believe. It forces you to study to know what is true. And so when you get into some of those situations, you're going to have to be able to mentally grapple with these difficult topics to bring the person you're studying with to a point of clarity, which means you already need to be clear yourself. And evangelism forces you to do that. It can be easy to be kind of squishy and soft around the edges of what we teach and what we believe when you're not forced to answer those questions in a Bible study. And so there are a lot of times maybe where you don't want to study the Bible with somebody because you're not even really sure what you believe yet. And evangelism forces you to do that. Another principle, plant, don't pick. You know, how many of you, when I asked you to write down a list of all the people that you know that aren't Christians, how many of you thought, well, I know people in my family that aren't Christians, but I don't want to put them on my list because I don't want to study with them? No, don't pre-disqualify anybody. Just because they're family members doesn't mean that you can write them off. Everybody needs the gospel. And so it's easy for us to look at certain people. Maybe you work with somebody and you think, that's the most terrible, unethical person that I've ever worked with. Well, guess what? That's the person that needs the gospel. We're not giving the gospel to people who have everything figured out. Oh, well, they're an addict, or they've been in prison, or this, and they need the gospel. If we understand that the gospel is the only way that someone can sort out the major problems, that someone can move past the huge mistakes they've made in their life, then what are we even doing here? The gospel is the solution to those things. The people that have made a mess of their lives need it more than anyone else. And it may be that somebody who you take the gospel to, whose life is kind of a mess, and you're thinking, well, I don't know if I study with this person, then I'm going to have to deal with the difficulty that they've made of their life. If you work with them and you believe the gospel can transform somebody's life, that Jesus can transform somebody's life, then having to deal with the dysfunction in their life is only for so long until they mature out of that. And then they may be, as they mature, in a better place than you were to help somebody out of those same mistakes that are prevalent. And so, don't choose people or pre-disqualify, as I like to say, people. If they're not a Christian, they're on your list. And they need the gospel. And they may take it or not. Another one is this. No one owes you a Bible study. You got to earn it. It may take time before you get there. The first Bible study that you'll have with someone, unofficially, is where you just talk to them about their religious past. You talk to them about how they were raised and what they know about the Bible and where they've come from and what their perspective is. And you get all that information out on the table and you listen and you want to make sure you know where they are. And you write down all of that stuff. And so it's important for them to know that you really care about them and where they are in their life and what they're grappling with. Invite them out to dinner, invite them to church, but, like we had breakfast yesterday morning, invite them to breakfast. Just build relationships, show that you actually care about them. No one's just trying to dunk people in the baptistry. We actually care about souls. We know that we're going to live on for eternity. And that without the gospel of Christ, without the blood of Christ washing away their sins, that they're not going to be in heaven with us for eternity, and we want them to. And because of that, we love them, which means it may take, in the culture that we have today, it takes a little more work to earn the Bible study with somebody. They need to know that you really care. One of the great things about doing mission trips in other countries is is it doesn't take quite as much work to earn a Bible study. Most of the times they'll study the Bible with you right there on the street corner, and they're happy to do it. In our culture, it's just a little bit different. It takes a little bit more work to earn a study. Another principle is something that has been done pretty well here and can always use improvement everywhere, is just keeping good records. Keep good records of the people that are on your list, your contact list, and make contact cards and follow up. Without having a good list of who you are studying with or the people that you're trying to initiate studies with, the people fall through the cracks. And people are worth keeping good records of them. That's one of the things we're going to do in our campaigns, is we're going to have hundreds of contact cards. And when we leave at the end of the week, we're going to hand a stack of contact cards to the congregation who I've already trained on how to use them and how to follow up. And they'll probably have 6 months to a year of work left following up. And so keeping good records is vital. And of course, new convert training. We're going to take some new convert booklets with us when we go that are in Spanish. And so when someone becomes a Christian, they don't really know what they don't know. It's important to have in place perhaps a class on Sundays, or what's even more effective is just having one-on-one or with a small group of people and just studying through the fundamentals of Christianity. And without that, we kind of hang them out to dry, and we expect them to just, well, we don't. Someone who's a new Christian, we don't just expect them to be okay. We don't expect them to just mature. You know, when a baby is born, we don't just sit them there on the table and expect them to be fine. It takes some help in maturing, in learning, in feeding, in nurturing, in having a relationship. I want to share with you, this is something that we learned in the American Mission Campaign. That is a very simplistic pattern, but it gives us real clarity about what is the model for a growing congregation. And a growing congregation is just this. First, it's a congregation that decides they want to grow. You have to decide that first, right? You have to decide. There isn't anybody that goes to college and graduates, right? Unless they first decided that's what they were going to do. That's who I want to be. Because unless you're going to decide to do that, then you're not going to do what's necessary. Set the goals. Go take the steps necessary. And so that's the first thing, is you got to just decide that. The second thing as we go through this is you got to make contacts. You have to make a conscious list and on paper of all the people you know who aren't Christians. And one of the best ways, the best way to do it is for everyone in the room to write down all the people they know who aren't Christians. That's the quickest way to come up with contacts. There are some people that, as we have seen, that you will never meet unless you knock on their door. I encourage you to go and knock on doors. That's something a lot of congregations don't do, but I'm telling you, there are people that you will never meet and who will never hear the gospel unless you knock on their door. And you know, I know here, that's a couple hours a month that a group goes. And most congregations don't do that anymore. They think that that's antiquated, and it may not be the most effective way to make contacts, but it is certainly something that shouldn't just be swept under the rug. It needs to be done at least some, because there are certainly, and go systematically through the city, there are certainly people that you will never meet unless you knock on their door. And it may be as easy as not going with the group here, but it may be just as easy as just walk down your street that you live on and just meet your neighbors. That's probably the most effective way, is to just be a good neighbor and to show them who you are, initiate a friendship with them, and earn a Bible study with them. So that's door knocking right there. And so be creative in the way that you do that. And so as you do that, you prospect people to see who wants to have a study. Of course, then if you know a way to have a study with somebody, you study with them. And back to the Bible studies, if you actually get someone to go all the way through those, right now it's right at 90% of people will decide to become a Christian after that study. About 90%. And of course, if they decide to get baptized into Christ, and they are a new convert, you can't convert anybody. You show them the gospel, and they decide to convert. And so, as a congregation with new converts, what is a congregation with new converts? What is that? Well, that's a growing church. And that's the simple pattern. And so, it may just be you that's doing this. It may just be you. But if you continue and set that example, then more people will do it. And then you'll grow, not for the sake of numbers, for the sake of souls. And so I wanted to show you this. This is our campaign schedule. This right here, if you want to go to Peru, it's this week right here. If you'd like to go with me, talk to me about that. I just want to show you that schedule. I want to just leave you with one thought, just one thought. In Acts chapter 8, in the second half of the chapter, you have Philip and the Ethiopian who's on the chariot. You have two characters there. You have someone who's evangelizing and someone who's being evangelized. You have someone who is giving the gospel and you have someone who needs the gospel. You have two categories of people there. And every person on the face of the earth fits into one of those two categories. They're either evangelizing or being evangelized, or need of being evangelized. They're either giving the gospel or are in need of the gospel. Now, one of the sad realities of that dichotomy, of those two categories, is this. Those who are not taking the gospel, those who are not evangelizing, are automatically in the other category. Someone who is a Christian, but who does not feel the passion and the fire within them and the realization that the people they know in their life who aren't Christians are going to spend eternity somewhere, if that hasn't fueled a passion within them to begin reaching out to people, then what I would submit to you is that they are still in need of conversion themselves. That they are in need of evangelizing. If you're a Christian today and you were baptized into Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, but the Lord's Supper that we just took and staring into the eyes of Christ, knowing that you're guilty of His blood, hasn't motivated you, then let me invite you to look into the eyes of Christ. Let me invite you to look, as Peter did across the courtyard when he realized he had betrayed Christ and his eyes met Jesus' eyes, and then he went out and wept bitterly. May we be brokenhearted about our part in the suffering of Christ, and in particular, our unworthiness to have the gift that He has given us. And to understand that it's only by the mercy and the grace of God that we have heard the gospel and responded to it ourselves. And may we beg God mercy for all of the times and all of the chances and all of the opportunities that we have passed up to put the gospel into possession of somebody who doesn't have it yet. Which category are you in this morning? Perhaps you're not a Christian. Without the blood of Christ, your eternity is without God. Without the blood of Christ, you have no hope. And if you think you have hope, then it's a false hope. There's hope only found in Christ. Sebastian's going to sing a song of encouragement. This is an opportunity where you have right now. This is not a special time, but this is right now. This is the present moment. If you're not a Christian, you can become one today. You can be baptized into Christ for the forgiveness of your sins. Perhaps you need help or prayers. Perhaps there's sin that you've allowed to move into your life that is just keeping you from being faithful. It's keeping you from carrying out the duty God has given you. Repent of that. Let us help you break the chains of that sin out of your life so that you can turn to God in faithfulness and let Him guide your steps. So if you have a need, please come as we stand and sing the song of encouragement.